What's up, Steelers fans? Welcome back to Around the Burgh. I'm Mitchell Wolf here with my co-host Shane Kubas to discuss the Steelers' most recent win, a 15-10 victory over the Cleveland Browns. We are live on Twitch, on the Steelers ATB Twitter, and on the Around the Block YouTube. I'll introduce my co-host Shane Kubas. Shane, how you doing tonight?
Doing well. Obviously, happy about the win. Definitely a lot to talk about, though. It's not an easy one by any means, and talk about what it means the rest of the year.
Yeah, always great to have a victory Sunday night recording. This was a weird game. If anybody watched, they know that.
Yeah.
Shane, do you want to just get the fake field goal thing out of the way so we can
Listen,
just talk about the rest of the game?
listen. Like I understand. Like I do think that this team needs to be more aggressive in general, especially like on their fourth down decisions and stuff like that. But this
Mhm.
was not the type of time to do it. I mean, this was the defensive slugfest. Just get your points, move on. And then obviously the elephant in the room obviously is Boswell's health. I'm hoping that he is going to be all right. I think it was a concussion is what he ended up being diagnosed with.
Yes.
Who knows how that'll affect him. Hopefully, it's not anything long term, but it compounds the already kind of poor decision in my point, especially with it being that long of a fourth down. Like if you needed 2 yards, maybe you could run something a little bit funky and
Hmm.
try to get those 2 yards. But this was he had to throw the ball down the field for it to actually work.
Yeah. So if you haven't watched the game and you haven't seen the play, Steelers ran a fake field goal, tied 3-3 with a few minutes left in the second quarter, and it was basically a fake field goal pass that Chris Boswell did not complete, and he also got hit in the head, which should have been a penalty, but that doesn't really change the outcome, and it was incomplete, and he was out for the rest of the game with a concussion. But so the first thing is that Mike Tomlin addressed this in his post game presser, and he said, this was a bad call. Like we were trying to be aggressive, try to get a big score on the board, and it was a bad call. And he's like, it was kind of one of those weird things where it's like it was a bad call because we didn't execute. So it's like, are you like? I think he was trying to take accountability, but it's also where it's like if you read into this, he's technically not blaming. He's like technically blaming the players.
Yeah,
But he said, we shouldn't have had it in the playbook because like it wasn't ready to be debuted. He basically said they thought they had a good look with where they were on the field, and he just said, it's a bad call and we shouldn't have done it. So kind of at least halfway owning up to it. So I'm fine with that. But for me, that I said this, this is a play where if it works, he's a genius.
yeah.
And if it's not, he's a pariah. So, and luckily they were able to win the game without this necessarily really mattering to the final score. It would have made it more comfortable for sure,
Yeah,
but
but
it didn't really matter as much. So that's nice.
yeah, it's one of those things where like it's a bad thing that happened, obviously, and it's a bad play call, but because it didn't make the difference in the game, it's gonna get forgotten eventually. Especially if Boswell is healthy for next game. Now, if he's not, then obviously that compounds the already bad decision, but hopefully that's not going to be the case. So.
Right. And I mean, luckily the Steelers do have a long week. They get an extra day with Monday Night
Yeah.
Football coming up next week against the Bears. So that's good. But yeah, so that was a weird play. And, he got knocked out. Then they have Presley Harvin trying to do kickoffs and he shanks one out of bounds. And
Yeah.
they didn't send him out there for any field goals or extra points. And apparently Cam Sutton is backup holder, which was fun.
Yeah, right. It's always someone random on the team. It's never like someone you'd expect or like whatever. It's always some random position player on or whatever. Yeah, it's just I don't know why that is, but it's interesting for sure.
Yeah, I was like, okay, this is going to be nuts. I'm very excited to see what happens. But luckily, he didn't really have to do anything in
Yeah, I
that
didn't
position,
have
so
to
that
do
was
that.
good.
Yeah.
But we'll jump to the rest of the game. So, the final score obviously doesn't indicate as much, but I think if you watched it, aside from maybe the first quarter where the Browns dominated just in terms of time of possession,
Yeah.
in that they got 2 possessions, the Steelers got 1. I would say the Steelers pretty much dominated the majority of this game.
Especially from a physical standpoint, like with the running game, especially because the Browns came in as I believe, especially with the Ravens kind of struggling recently, the number one rushing team in yards per game, and
That sounds right.
they had less than 100 yards total from what if my math is right here. And Chubb, granted, he's coming off an injury, but he didn't look that great. Honestly, had a couple nice plays, but nothing spectacular. And keeping that part of their offense at bay was really what we needed to do to make sure that we have a chance to possess the ball ourselves. And that really shone through, especially in the second half once things kind of got going our way.
Yeah, I think arguably for one of the few times this season, I guess against the Broncos to some extent, but the Steelers were really dominant on the ground game. They were able to get Najee going for 4 to 5 yards a clip almost, and his average is going to be a little bit lower because
Yeah.
a good amount of the runs on the last few drives were didn't go anywhere because the Browns were trying to stop the run, but the seconds ran off the clock were more important than the yards gained in those situations. So it's not going to look good on the box score, but I thought he had an excellent game. He obviously had a really fun touchdown where he, jumped 7 yards through the air into the end zone.
Yeah, he had the type of day that we needed from him for sure.
Mhm.
I think that, like I said, this team needs to win in this type of way, realistically, most times where Ben needs to just stay within himself, not try to do too much, but also
Mhm.
not limit the offense as much as he was early on. And if we can get Najee going consistently and actually give him chances to pick up those 3, 4, 5 yards a clip, this is how we can keep teams from, getting the defense too tired, especially. That was a big issue last year.
Right. And I thought the defense played extremely well. Obviously allowing only 10 points was great.
Mhm.
They got a key turnover in one instance, then they got a big stop on fourth down in another. TJ Watt had a really great game. He did have, I
Yeah.
think he had one roughing the passer penalty, or no, it was
Yeah.
Highsmith that got
Yeah,
called for
Highsmith
it.
had that on
Yes.
the one play. Yeah.
But Watt kind of had Baker held, so that was the problem. Cam Hayward was dominant as always. I thought
Yeah.
aside from the Browns touchdown where Devin Bush kind of overran it, I thought him and Schobert had excellent games,
Yeah.
especially as run defenders, which was key. I mean, Tomlin said in his post game presser that stopping Nick Chubb was basically their primary goal, and Chubb was 16 for 61, no touchdowns, and averaging 3.8 yards per carry. So I would say that was effective.
Yeah. It's
That
about as good as you're going to be on Chubb most weeks. So, yeah.
exactly. And then I'm seeing a lot of our colleagues who are Browns writers and fans.
Yeah.
They're basically saying like this loss wasn't on Baker. And I would agree. I thought that he
Yeah.
played
Me
quite
too.
well. I thought his receivers, specifically his wide receivers, let him down a
Mhm.
good bit. I thought Hooper had a good amount of catches, and Njoku and Bryant were also pretty solid. So the guys had like Landry, who had some big drops and a fumble. You had Odell Beckham, who was a non-factor.
Yeah. Just that one
Which
catch for 6 yards. And
exactly.
Landry, for the type of receiver he's been and still has to be if he wants to be effective, getting only 5 catches on 10 targets just isn't going to get it done. Like,
Yeah.
he's not a guy that's this downfield threat, the big play guy. He has to get involved, just that chain mover. And catching only 5 passes for 65 yards isn't too bad. But like you said, the fumble, everything else involved with that, like he needs to do more if they want to have him on the field consistently.
Right.
This whole receiving core just seems to be out of sync. And like I feel like they need to start moving and getting the other younger guys more involved as the season
Mhm.
goes on, especially if things don't pick up soon. Because
Mhm.
this could be it's more of a year to kind of evaluate everybody with how strong the AFC North is right now. It
Mhm.
could very quickly fall out of place for them if they don't get that figured out.
Right. And you were even mentioning we'll go back to Baker, is that, was it worth it playing? So can you kind of repeat what you were saying earlier? Just 'cause
Yeah,
this
it
is
just feels
interesting.
like as much as he played, I think, well, like we talked about, like he didn't lose them this game by any means. Like, he
Mhm.
wasn't the reason this game was lost for them. But I don't know how much better or how much he impacted the game compared to Keenum would have done,
Mhm.
especially when you see how the receivers were playing. Like, to me, like, if he's really not that healthy, which he didn't look like himself exactly, he definitely still played better than I maybe expected.
Mhm.
I would maybe rather get him healthy for down the stretch and give him more time to kind of get that figured out. Maybe they're kind of past that. Maybe that's not going to get any better till he has surgery or whatever it's going to be.
Mhm.
And then I guess in that case, then you play the guy that's your quarterback. But if there's any chance he could be healthier moving forward, this might have been a game as well, especially when you got a win last week and on Thursday night. Maybe give him another week and see what you can do from there. But it's hard to say.
Yeah, I disagree. I think
Yeah.
that this game was supremely important for them, especially just because of the division standings implications.
Yeah, that's
Obviously,
true.
it's a very emotional game against a rival. Unfortunately, they do have a while until their bye. It's not until looks like after Thanksgiving, the first week
Yeah, I
of
think
December.
so.
So that's pretty
Yeah.
long. But I think they did have to have him go. And I don't think he was really that limited. I when I was listening to the first portion of the game on the radio because I was traveling, and it seemed like they were, and even at points during the game, they were doing a pretty decent job of just kind of dicing up the Steelers' zone defense, finding mostly their tight ends,
Yeah.
in pretty wide open areas. So, again, I don't think this loss is on Baker. We might have to have like kind of a conference with some of the Browns fans, because I think you do pay him as give him the long term extension as your franchise quarterback. I know that he's kind of had some issues, and he's the guy where you do have to kind of build stuff around him, and you're worried that he's might turn into Jared Goff. But I still do think that he is probably, if not just as more talented than Goff. And I think that for all its drawbacks, his leadership style and his attitude bring a lot more to the team that isn't really quantifiable.
I definitely agree with that. I think the problem that the Browns might run into is like how much money is he actually going to want? Is this going to be the type of thing where he tries to reset the market? Because I just don't know if he has the pull to do that as good as he's been. Because some of the contract, I mean, we're looking at 40 million plus now if you're trying to reset anything or try to be in that top tier range.
Right.
And yeah, they could do that. And I think that part of it too is they've just been so bad at quarterback for so long before him that I just feel like not only is he good enough, I think at this point, especially if he does get healthy and everything, to warrant being the starter moving forward, obviously, but just having to restart after the limited but still more success than they've had in a long time that he's given them is just a punch to the gut that they don't want to have to take.
Right. And I don't, if I were a fan, like I wouldn't want to, kind of just buy in on this quarterback just because he is the first one to bring you success.
Right.
This would be like, this is basically like if you're like kind of marry like your first, boyfriend or girlfriend in like middle school, that's basically what the Browns would be doing. And obviously I don't think that's generally a good idea, but I think that in this case, I think he is worth it. It looks like his agent is Jack Mills of Shark Sports Management, so I don't really know anything about them.
Davis Mills?
That would be funny.
That'd be funny, no.
But so it's not like a Drew Rosenhaus or a Scott Boras,
right?
or
one of the big ones, yeah.
So they might not be as aggressive in terms of trying to get him a crazy amount of deal. So maybe he would kind of take a quote discount.
Maybe,
to try to bring in some more talent, especially if they're going to be kind of resetting their receiver core. But I mean, they're drafting pretty well at wide receiver, so they might not even need to like bring in any high-priced guys.
I like
Donovan Peoples-Jones is really good. Schwartz will have a role moving forward. Rashard Higgins is. I was like, oh wow, Rashard Higgins is still there.
Yeah, he's a guy that like, especially
he's been in the league for 8 years.
It feels like it, right?
Yeah,
he was. I think he was drafted the same year that they had that 0-16 debacle.
He was drafted the same year as Jarvis Landry.
Doesn't that sound stupid?
Wild. That
sounds wrong, but I know obviously it's right. But like that. Like he's a guy that's really worked well with Baker too, so like he could honestly slide right into a spot there too and just kind of play that role.
And like if you can hit on like, I mean, if you look like compare it to the Viking situation where he's a first round pick, but like if you hit on a guy like a Justin Jefferson, and he doesn't need to be like a Justin Jefferson, but something maybe a slightly toned down version, like you get that number one receiver, you have all these other great complementary weapons. That's a really good receiving core moving forward. But we'll move away from Brown's hypothetical team building philosophical questions.
What
else do we want to talk about with this game?
Really, I think one of the things that like we already kind of mentioned, but like the pass rush was really good today. And I wonder if, because we already talked about it on the show earlier in the week, but what happens with Ingram? Like, do we kind of just decide that it's worth moving on from him if he doesn't want to be here?
I think they have until Tuesday at 4.
Tuesday at 4.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, because he was obviously inactive and out for this game, so that was interesting. But yeah, I mean, TJ. Well, I mean, especially once Jack Conklin went out, and TJ was still playing pretty well before then. But once they put, I believe that's Blake Hance.
I think that was who it was. Yeah.
Yes, and once he came in, TJ was just running in circles, and I felt bad for him. It was a tough look.
Yeah, coming in to play against Y is not exactly a great
Hance,
thing.
Yes.
It was not exactly the best situation to come off the bench for, but
tough look. But I mean, TJ had some plays. Cam and TJ combined for that sack on the first drive, which was huge to limit the Browns to a field goal there. Highsmith got pretty limited, and I think that was, Jedrick Wills is really good young player, so that's part of the reason
with him
why
healthy, that was big.
But I think we saw like we said, like the run defense was really good, which is a credit to the defensive line, which had some issues against the Seahawks. And like Isaiah Loudermilk popped off the tape a lot, which
he continues to make us look not so great for kind of disregarding him, which I mean, I'll take the loss whenever it's a positive thing. It's one thing if I blow a player up and he sucks, but I don't mind.
And Taco Charlton had some plays around. Like I kept seeing this 98. I was like, that's not Vince Williams.
That's not Vince.
I was so confused. Yeah. I mean, just having a guy on the team named Taco is fantastic. So
that's always, I feel like, a positive thing, especially if he isn't just an absolute mess, which he wasn't. So definitely take that. But honestly, overall, like I said, this game was really weird because like not a whole lot felt like happened, right? Like it was kind of just one of those slugfest type of things, where it's just like who's going to out physical each other, and we managed to get that done even with the Browns having Chubb back and everything. And that's
Mhm.
that's the big thing is, like I said, this is the type of game that hopefully with a little bit more offensive firepower, obviously, but this is the type of game that was going to be the blueprint if we want to win, especially against teams that do have the really good offenses that we don't want our defense to have to be out there against constantly. Run the ball, let Ben play complementary football, get Freiermuth involved, which is great as
Yeah, we
well.
should talk about that.
Yeah, definitely talk about that, which, is second in the team in targets behind, of course,
Mhm.
Deontay Johnson. We know he's going to lead in
Mhm.
targets. So
I mean, I think Najee leads the team in receptions, or he did at one point in this game.
he did at one point for sure. I
Yeah.
think Johnson maybe beats him now, but it's
Probably,
close.
yeah.
It's close, yeah. But getting him involved much more is going to be great. I have to see as well the way Gentry's playing. Maybe Ebron doesn't have to play ever again. Hopefully, maybe we'll
I
see
mean,
about
I
that.
had my folks, I call him Yak Gentry on
Right,
his
he's
yards
like,
after catch.
it's crazy. I don't know what's going on with him, but good for him,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think I need to see Ebron on this team again personally. Whatever, we'll see what
No,
happens there.
guess not.
But overall, like I said, I think the offense, if they play the style of game with, like I said, hopefully more big plays sprinkled in,
Mhm.
more so, that's how we can complement our defense and try to keep this streak going against, especially against some teams that are a little bit questionable coming up. So
Mhm. Yeah, and I think those big touchdown drives in the second half, I think, really helped the defense, and that they didn't
yeah,
have to go out there after multiple 3-and-outs and keep trying to stop the run. I think if those drives had ended in 3-and-outs, I think the defense would have really buckled, and Chubb could have had a much bigger game and
very
reversed the
possible. Yeah,
result. But yeah, I mean, Freiermuth was awesome. I mean, he had that insane catch in the back of the end
yeah,
zone.
awesome play.
Yeah, and I think he caught did he catch all of his targets? No, I think there were some that missed him, but I don't think they were drops or anything.
Yeah, I think he was
4 for 7,
yeah,
but I
4
think
for
those were
7.
mostly misses by Ben. But
Yeah,
he's when they use him as like a pulling blocker, he's fantastic. I love like when they run like the kind of like the old counter tray kind of plays they used to run with Le'Veon. Muth does a great job of clearing out those holes as a moving blocker, which I love to see. Because Gentry's kind of your more like stand in there,
yeah.
just base block. But if they can use Muth as kind of a pulling blocker and then and they do this a bit already and incorporate him into like the play action game, that's a really sound, effective strategy moving forward. So that was great to see.
Yeah, I'm glad that he's shown enough that makes me think that, like I said, Ebron to me, especially if we're not going to attack the middle of the field very much and up the seams, like
I mean,
he just doesn't bring
Ben
value.
had that one where he found Gentry wide open right in the middle of the field.
That's it. It's like if we're not going to use the seams, especially very much, like
Yeah.
Ebron just doesn't do anything particularly great other than try to stretch the seams to me.
Mm-hmm.
At least not anything better than Freiermuth does or even Gentry so far this year does. So
Yeah.
definitely hope they kind of use those two as a primary tight end duo moving forward.
But yeah, I mean, I think the receivers had a great game. I mean, of course, James Washington, 1 catch, 1 target, 1 catch, 4 yards. I don't really understand what's going on
I
there.
don't know what's going on there. Yeah.
I think, but I mean, Deontay 6 of 13 targets for 98 yards, a big chunk of that coming on the 50-yard
The
catch and run to
yeah.
ice the game. But he did. I'll say this: he had some. I think you could technically classify them as drops. But I'll give a lot of credit to Greg Newsome, who was on him a lot and played him really well.
He did really well, especially that tackle whenever we were trying to get the first down
on the drag route.
Territory. Yeah, that was. I thought for sure when he caught that, I'm like, yeah, this is gonna be a first down, and then he just pulled him down. I'm like, geez, all right.
Yeah, he was really sticky on him, and kind of again, that's why I would more say like contested catches, and Deontay just lost those, and that's not good. But he did make a lot of clutch catches, which were great. Let's see. Claypool was 5. Oh, where did it go?
4 for
44, and he had one where he was like kind of he looked like Juju almost, pulling people with him, which was great.
Seeing that was very interesting because like if they could use him in that type of role a little bit, and because he has more physical talent obviously, and he can get more of the yards after catch even than Juju could. Obviously, I want to see him get more involved because really, other than the Broncos game, he hasn't had any big time games.
Yeah, and he had and he had a nice on their like kind of end around
run.
Yeah,
that's
play,
I think it's 16 yards.
Yeah, that play always works. They just need to run that once.
I don't know why. Like it seems to always work every time they do it, but then they only do it like twice.
I think this time they did dress it up a little different because they've. I think they've kind of just run it out of the bunch where they'll just like fake the regular handoff and then kind of pitch it to him on the end around. This time they ran the jet sweep to McLeod and then he pitched it back to Claypool, which was a different look, which was great.
Yeah,
I mean that's the Matt Canada offense. I would say this was a fantastic Matt Canada game.
Yeah, this is the type of thing like what we saw him do. This is what his bread and butter is, and
yeah,
if we can just sprinkle in, like I said, more of the big plays as
Mhm.
part of that. The little extra stuff that he does, it kind of opens things up a little bit.
Yeah.
If we could take advantage of those things more, that's really how we can elevate it from
And,
from there.
I would say that Ben had one really bad player where he lost his mind, where he threw into triple coverage for basically no
Yeah,
reason.
I don't know what that was about.
And I think that was on the first drive out of the third quarter, which is just like, what are you doing?
He's still again. It seems like this year for some reason, like he's always kind of done some weird stuff occasionally, but like
I
he's not
get
a veteran
I get
quarterback.
why I think that was, 30-year-old Ben. I think he gets that
Yeah,
in there,
sometimes, yeah,
maybe. Especially if Claypool's on there and not Deontay, but
yeah.
40-year-old Ben, it's not happening.
Nah, he's sometimes he
But
does stuff that just doesn't look like he realizes that he's 40, and it.
mhm. But
So
one of the Canada plays I loved, and I forget exactly when it was, but they ran like a play action and they had. I mean, it was kind of just like Najee just kind of like leaked out of the backfield and turned around and and Ben checked it down. But like that was like really how all of this is meant to go. They
yeah,
had everybody kind of going downfield. Ben had a good pocket, and he's like, okay, nobody's open. I'll check it down. Najee turned it up for like 20 yards, which was
that's like I
awesome.
said, that's the type of stuff that like if we can get those things going, and
Mhm.
Ben goes through his reads and
Yeah,
actually progresses to the point, because if you're going to throw checkdowns, that's fine as long as it's progression, right? Like we
yeah,
shouldn't be planning to throw checkdowns, which is what
yeah,
it kind of looked like early in the year.
yeah.
That's the problem that we were running
And
into.
like the one counter example was the 2-point conversion after Ben's
Yeah,
magnificent, graceful QB draw was turned around for penalty, which we're going to talk about penalties in a little bit. But
yeah,
on the ensuing play, you know, I'll say this, I think this was a game where Dan Moore had his moments. I would
yeah.
say he looked like a professional football offensive lineman, but he was one-on-one with Myles Garrett pretty much the whole game.
Yeah, and honestly, for Ben to be sacked twice in this game is kind of a miracle to me.
Yeah,
From
big time.
just looking at the matchups that we had to deal
Mhm.
with and everything, like I'll take it honestly.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
I'm not gonna be too mad at him.
Yeah, I wish they had the pressure numbers up already. Let me see.
Yeah,
Where's
which I
Myles
don't know if
Garrett
they
had two
do.
QB hits in addition to the sack, so he
That's
was around the ball for sure. And I
I
think
mean,
on
he's gonna be.
the radio at one point they were like, "Oh, Dan Moore did well," and then a few plays later, like Garrett's just getting closer and closer every time. So
He's just like trying to hold on for dear life, which
yeah, like
honestly, that's all you can do
yeah,
sometimes,
it's not a
especially as a
matter of
rookie.
if, it's a matter of when.
Yeah,
But on that 2-point conversion, they have only two routes I would say that went to the end zone,
yeah, I
and then
saw
they
that.
had
Yeah,
two more underneath routes than Deontay just kind of sitting there. And Ben gets pressured very quickly.
yeah, immediately, basically. Yeah,
And so he's like, okay, I know Deontay's over there. I'll just throw it there. And everybody's like, oh, it's Ben checking down like a big situation. Ha ha ha. And I'm like, a lot, and it's usually the same people on Twitter.
yeah, I know.
But I'm just like, okay, so the two deep routes are in triple coverage, which you were clowning him for earlier,
Right. Yeah.
for what it's worth.
Hmm.
And I was like, if he had thrown there, you'd been like, oh, stupid Ben throwing triple coverage again. It's like, okay, well, I don't know really what you want from him. And I said that to me many times, and she owned me. I'll say it
Hmm.
because I know, and I said like, I know you wouldn't do this, but I know Steven Ruiz and Justice Mosqueda would.
It's tough because like we'll be the first to say like there's been a lot of times where we've criticized Ben for his play this year,
Yeah,
and it's because he's 40 and he looks 40 a lot of the time, right? Like
yeah,
that's just what
definitely.
happens. But if you're going to criticize him, especially at this point in his career, for checking the ball down, at least do it whenever it seemed like it was the plan from the beginning. That
Yes,
just wasn't the case. Like there's
yeah,
some play calls early in the year where I'm like, what in the world are we trying to do here?
yeah.
This hasn't been the case really for the past couple of weeks, which is great. But at
Hmm.
the same time, again, if you're going to throw into triple coverage, I'm going to probably clown you too, especially if it's unnecessary.
Yeah.
But if you make the right read and it doesn't go well, then I'll live with that
I
personally.
do get there was a good point that said like at that point throwing it short is almost more dangerous than throwing it deep because and so I'm like okay maybe but
Yeah.
I think that's just more of it. I'm getting I have pressure in my face immediately. I know where a receiver is.
Yeah,
I'm just
he
gonna throw it
knows.
to him.
He knew he's like I could get the ball
Yeah.
out and give us a chance, opposed to just throwing it up for no
Yeah,
reason.
I think my issue is that all of these plays are treated with the same measure of egregious error, whereas like
Yeah,
that play and like the McLeod check down the other against the
the other one,
Seahawks
yeah.
are on a completely different planet than
The other
and
one,
the swing routes to Najee in the back, those are on completely
yeah,
different
there's
levels to me.
completely different reasons for the play call,
Mhm.
completely different outcomes as far as why that
Yes.
happened. Like that's the problem. Is like if you're going to criticize him for checking the ball down, that's fine as long as it's because he did it for no apparent reason. Like if
Yes.
there's no reason he should have done it, like some of the plays where we saw like Fryermuth coming open in the middle of the field
Mhm.
or whatever else happening. Like
Yep.
yeah, criticize Ben for not going through his reads.
Yeah.
This was a guy getting almost killed, and he's like, "Forget it, I'm just going to throw it to the guy."
Yeah,
that knows there."
exactly.
It's like
Yeah.
So
So, but the other thing I do want to talk about is the penalties of this game. And so obviously there's the one with Boswell getting a helmet to helmet, which was pretty clear. Gene Sarator said it should have been called. I think you could have called roughing the passer. Somebody said, "Oh, he's outside the pocket." I'm like, doesn't matter. Like, he's not a runner.
In that case, no, it
Yeah.
does not matter.
So that's a bad call, and I don't think it changes. It shouldn't change the complexion of the original play call of the fake, and that it wasn't executed well. But that's a missed call. There were a lot of weird holding calls, especially on the defense for both teams. I think it happened twice to the Steelers and once to the Browns, which was ridiculous because of how infrequently that's called. Especially one where a lot of people were saying like this is a completely phantom call. I don't know what they're seeing. A decent amount. I mean, this kind of probably goes both ways. A decent amount of offensive holding calls that weren't called. So I'll say that there were a lot of times I felt that the Browns were mugging the Steelers receivers, especially kind of in the red zone, which one time at least I know it was tipped, but a lot of contact there. And again, they weren't calling it both ways really, so that's fair, I suppose. But
that kind of evens out. It's one of those things where it's hard to, if they're going to play like that, at least like if you go into it and you realize, okay, they're going to get away with certain things, at least we know that. But still, it's like some of it.
But there was a roughing the passer on Mayfield, which probably legitimate, but just frustrating with the miss on Boswell and the fact that that never gets called for Ben. So that's part of it. And I think there was like an illegal formation on Chooks at one point, which was questionable, which because he's like not all the way on the line of scrimmage or something. That's when I was listening on the radio, so I couldn't see
those were all. Yeah, I think I remember which one that was. Those calls are always kind of weird because it's like just a little bit of a lineup issue, and like I understand that there's a reason for it, but like it's pretty ticky tacky sometimes.
Right, and it was funny because like the Steelers had a good amount more penalties, and I thought a good amount of them were questionable, but. That early in the broadcast, they did show like a little cryon graphic that said like the Steelers, I think, are the third least penalized, or maybe I don't know if it was fewest or yardage, but
one of the two,
yeah, and the Browns are the most penalized teams, and people were like, oh, like this team always commits penalties in the worst situations. It's like, well, perhaps situationally, like it just happens in the bad situations, but overall, on the average, it's not too bad, especially considering how bad we expect this offensive line to be. And how
they've done a good job of not doing that. Yeah.
Like you said, Ben only sacked twice. I don't think he was pressured that much, honestly.
Not really. I mean, a lot of his throws, granted, like I said, this was one of those games where he kind of did rely a lot on the short pass game like we normally would.
Yeah.
But still, he wasn't in a situation where he kept like running for his life and having to get the ball at the last second.
Yeah.
So that was good to see for sure.
Yeah. So officiating was generally bad in this game and frustrating. So that kind of added a stink to it. But luckily, the Steelers were able to kind of overcome that and deal with that with having a kicker, which was
that was such a weird dynamic because I was just like, this doesn't happen obviously very often.
No.
I mean, it was kind of reminiscent of Colts Ravens game where except at least they tried to kick the ball, but it didn't work out because Blankenship clearly wasn't right. So I guess they didn't feel comfortable with Harvin doing that, which makes sense. I don't think he didn't attempt a single field goal or extra point while he was in college.
Nope.
So at least would be going back.
Somebody went and found his max preps in high school where he was 0 for 2 on field goals.
Right. So it's like I don't blame them for not even attempting to put him out there. Like I'd rather just go for 2.
I think he put his first kickoff out of bounds.
Yeah.
And I think it was on one of the Steelers' final drives, he had his weekly shank, which always just comes at the worst possible time.
It sucks because like I'm definitely like we obviously love Harvin. Like, he's great, but like I do hope that, especially during the course of this season, that he figures it out because I don't want him to have to worry about like going into camp next year and like, am I going to get competition? What's going to go? Like I don't want to have that happen. So like hopefully he does kind of clear up a lot of the shank issues, especially before the end of the year.
And I think I've heard that Jordan Berry's kicking pretty well in Minnesota, so that adds something.
Of course, he'd have a career year outside.
Yeah, and of course, I mean he's in a dome, so that's helpful because he usually struggles in the cold weather. But once they get into NFC North games that are outside at the end of the year,
we might see that.
Yeah, that might see
that change.
But we're coming to the end here. We'll do our 3 stars. I was late traveling, so it's not in the rundown. So we're gonna do this pretty much off the top of our heads, which will be a fun experience. So we'll again, like we always do, we'll start with our 3rd stars, and Shane, I'll kick it to you to start.
I'm gonna go just because, like I said, I think his stats don't paint the whole picture, but I think he was really a big engine of the offense. I'm gonna go with Harris for my 3rd star. I think he had a really good game. Nothing spectacular, but this is the type of game, like I said, the running game, and he has to have for us to stay in games, be competitive against especially better teams that have good offenses. So
absolutely. For mine, I will go I'll go with Cam Hayward because again, not the biggest stat game for him. 3 solo tackles, half a sack, and 2 QB hits, but just a lot of really clutch plays that aren't going to show up in the box score, and that he's able to kind of reset the line of scrimmage, force the running back to bounce outside. I think that was the case on a 4th down attempt that the Browns didn't convert.
Yeah, he got in the backfield very early on and kind of did everything there to move him out of the way.
Yeah, so that's kind of just Cam Hayward's thing, is just just making these really clutch plays when you absolutely need them. So all the props in the world to him. So now I'll go back to we'll kind of go snake format here. So for my second star, I'm going to go with Freiermuth. I thought, that obviously huge touchdown catch, great. Had some other big catches and runs, which is great to see. Getting him some yak opportunities is awesome. And like I said, he's really starting to kind of find his way as a blocker as well. I don't think maybe as good as Gentry yet, but I think he's well on his way to getting there, where he can be a truly versatile type of weapon for the offense.
Yeah, and for me, like my second star, it's kind of a cop out just because a lot of his production was on that last play, but you can still tell every week that Deontay Johnson is the engine of the passing offense. That's who we want to go through. That's who's going to get the football, especially in like third down situations. Hopefully, Freiermuth, your second star, gets to do that a little bit more. And it is nice to see him be second in targets this week. But I still think that Johnson had definitely a good game getting open on that play to ice the game was awesome, and we're going to keep seeing him be the top guy there.
And we're going to take just a quick aside here. When they ran, I think it was the final 2-point conversion where they just threw him a fade ball. I think it was interference.
Yeah.
2, we've talked about Chase Claypool's struggles as a contested catch receiver. I know he had at least one. Chase had at least 1 or 2 contested catches this week. I just don't. I get maybe he trusts Deontay more, but I just don't get that. If you're gonna throw a fade ball, just throw it.
Just throw it to him or Freiermuth even get him like a back of the end zone type of thing. We already saw him have the great catch.
Yeah, like just put him at like the X receiver and just throw him a fade ball because
throw it up to him.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so that was weird. So we're on snake. So then you give your first star, and I feel like we might be aligned here.
Yeah, I think we know who the first star is going to be in this game. I mean, he's been just spectacular. Even like you said, Conklin being out definitely kind of helped, just kind of add insult to injury. But TJ Watt is clearly still the best player on this team. Hayward and him kind of just taking turns every week, seeing who can outdo each other in terms of who could be the most dominant player. And really, like I said, until otherwise, I think that every year they always talk about who's defensive player of the year, right? And it's always ends up being, Aaron Donald's the guy that's always going to be considered the best defensive player. He's
basically the LeBron James,
right? It's like
of like the NFL, except I think the NFL is a little. It's weird. Like the NFL, I think is actually a little less vulnerable to prone to like voting fatigue. Yeah, like they're because like so I think they're kind of in a rut of like Aaron Donald's just like the greatest ever. So
that's the problem, right? It's like ideally, so I always try to say like I even got in arguments like during that time of year when we were going through defensive player of the year last year with Rams fans and stuff like that. I understand that Aaron Donald, realistically, if we're just looking at it from a holistic perspective, is the best individual defensive player in the NFL. And you can look at stats or whatever else, and like there's a lot that can lie there and everything. But right now, if we're going to exclude Donald, because I think that's the only fair thing to do, right now Watt's the number one for me as far as defensive player of the year. He has to be. The amount of impact he's had, just big plays, general production, what he means to the team, you can just tell that he's the engine outside of obviously Hayward that is going to keep this defense running, especially with secondary kind of not performing as well as we wanted them to so far.
For sure. And he was my first star as well. So 6 tackles, 4 solos, 1.5 sacks, 1 tackle for loss, and 3 QB hits. Yeah. And then he had the fumble recovery on the second to last drive for the Browns. So, not as good as a forced fumble as last week, but for fumble recovery is important all the same. And I'd echo everything you say. I think there'd probably be some comparisons between him and Myles Garrett this game. Garrett had a pretty similar stat line. He had 4 tackles, 4 solos, 1 sack, 2 TFLs, and 2 QB hits. So he had 1 extra TFL and 1 less QB hit. And I would definitely agree that Garrett was playing extremely well. I think Watt's competition for the majority of the game with Hance was easier than Garrett's against Dan Moore, even though neither are really top flight players.
Right.
But I feel like I just have to assume that Watt is being given the tougher assignment in that the Browns were doing more to take him away. And he's being asked to play in coverage, which he's not good at, but they're still doing it.
Yeah,
Butler, please stop. I am begging you. My children are starving.
Right? It's like him and Highsmith. Just listen. Highsmith had some nice moments in coverage last year as a rookie, even just because like they
Like
kind of put him in
3.
the right spot, right? Like, but these guys are pass rushers, right?
Yeah.
They're line of scrimmage players. Stop getting like I understand like it's cool, they're athletic, they can go in space, whatever. They're not good enough at it that you can argue taking them out of the pass rush. I'm
And like
sorry.
if you're gonna do it, like if you are absolutely hell bent on doing this,
Right.
have him cover Nick Chubb or Austin
Something.
Hooper.
Right.
Do not, and we talked about Landry and his struggles.
Yeah.
Do not have him in basically man coverage against Jarvis Landry. Just please, I'm begging you. My family is cold and starving.
It's just like give us something, man.
Yeah,
Like,
but
stop
anyways,
doing this. Yeah.
But I mean, I think a lot of people are talking about like why are the Steelers just leaving Dan Moore out there on an island? And I think their philosophy is Garrett, unless it gets really bad, Garrett's going to eat regardless. So we're just going to do what we do, and it worked.
That's honestly a fair point because sometimes like there's some players or some guys where like the argument could be made that like there's a good chance that they're going to make plays no matter what. So I would rather make sure nobody else is making plays and hope that we can manage it, right?
Right.
And
exactly.
that's what happened. Like we managed like Garrett still obviously had an impact in the game. It wasn't like he didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Can't say they got taken away by any means, but Moore held up enough that it didn't completely shut the offense down. And that's all you can ask for if you're going to put him one-on-one.
Because the idea of, we talk about this with Aaron Donald, we talk about this with TJ Watt, is that there's this idea of gravity. And that's something that I think a lot of people are going to be trying to quantify in terms of analytics in the future. But, we talk about like those guys drawing double teams. We talk a lot about it more in the passing game where guys like Devontae Adams, we talked about, like they draw that double coverage and you allow other guys to beat you. And TJ Watt's getting that, he's getting doubled and stuff. Whereas the Steelers kind of did the opposite. Like, you know what? We don't want to send 2 guys in slider protection to Garrett and then allow Jadeveon Clowney, Malik McDowell, whoever else was playing. And Garrett was the only guy that got the sacks. 2 sacks, both by Myles Garrett. And I think if you're saying we're going to let our rookie left tackle play one-on-one with Myles Garrett on basically every down, and you come away with 2 sacks from a guy who's arguably the best edge rusher in the NFL, I think that's a winning day.
Right, and that's the thing is like if you can manage it, as long as he isn't a true game-wrecking force in terms of like we can't run the ball at all, we can't get the pass off if it's more than a second, 10 in the pocket. Like you can manage that, especially with the way that the passing game has been used so far this year. Like we're not going to sit back and throw the ball after 5 seconds to these deep shots anyway. So let Ben manage the pocket his best, get the ball out whenever he needs to. And if Garrett gets home, then he gets home. If it happens too often, like you said, you move Gentry over, you double him with someone, whatever you have to do, but don't immediately don't give him the edge by already sliding protection towards him from the get-go instead of seeing what you can do first.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. That'll do it for us this week. Another win in the book. Steelers are 4-3, I believe 3rd in the division.
Yeah, now we'll be.
Yep. So we're going to have our preview of the Monday night game against the Bears later this week. This was our first broadcast doing this live on YouTube, Twitch, and our Steelers HTB Twitter. So make sure you're following us on all those platforms. I'm at Mitchell T. Wolf, WOLFE on Twitter. Shane, plug your socials and such.
So just at Shane Kubas. You can see it on the screen here, spelled with a Y. Don't forget that. I don't know if there is just at Shane Kubas on Twitter without a Y, but you don't need to be sending him any problems. So don't be doing that. So.
No, please tweet all of your takes on our takes at this other Shane Kubas.
Whoever might be there.
Yeah, direct all criticism to Shane Kubas with no Y. All right. Thanks everybody for listening. We hope to have you back next time.